Disruptors and curious minds, welcome to another episode of Thinking on Paper, where we take you, the curious, behind the scenes of the latest emerging tech, and we unpack it together. Why do we do it? Well, we all want to understand why this technology is going to be important, how the world's going to change, what it's going to mean to our families, our jobs, our own curiosity, and that's what we're here doing. Listen, all of these episodes won't be extremely easy to listen to, but I tell you what, they're going to be informative. They're going to be fun, and they're going to get you using this thing in your head, this jelly that's sitting in your skull. You're going to be thinking a little bit differently, hopefully, about this. So, Mark, I'm stoked. I'm stoked today because, we're talking about something that I spent a lot of time in. So I'm excited. What do we learn about, Mark?
Drumroll, data centers in space, 5 gigawatt data clusters with solar arrays 4 kilometers across, 400 miles up in the sun-synchronous orbit. Now, listeners might be wondering, why? Why not just build them here on Earth? And before we get into the how, I want to explain the why with a few quotes from the Starcloud white paper. So that's a clue to our guest today, Starcloud. The first is a quote from our good friend of the show, Elon Musk. We have silicon shortage today, a voltage step down, transformer shortage probably in about a year, and then just electricity shortages in general in about 2 years. And then there's another quote from Tom Muller, employee number 1 at SpaceX. The amount of power to run compute by 2045 will be the base power of the planet right now. The drain on resources is so high, you need to put that compute in space and use the power of the sun. That's a really good use of space to help save the planet. And that's why data centers in space. Now, Jeremy, I know this is your specialized subject, and Philip, it's his specialized subject as well. So I've brought a bell. If you two get too deep in the weeds about data center tech, I'm going to ring this just to reel you in. Okay.
I love that. And before we get into this episode, I want to remind everybody that we have our hot buttons that Mark runs. It's going to be really fun. We got our Thinking on Paper news. We have our carryover question, and we also unpack everything backstage at the very end. So stick around. Lastly, before we introduce the guest, Mark, I'm going to tee up a quote from one of my favorite books of all time. I'm not going to nerd out on this too much, but there's a guy named Gerard O'Neill that wrote a book in 1976 called The High Frontier. It was about building colonies in manufacturing lower Earth orbit. Someone who we referenced last show, Carl Sagan, was quoted in 1976 as he was talking to the U.S. House of Representatives on Gerard O'Neill's work. The engineering aspects of it are perfectly worked out by O'Neill's study group. It is practical. This was in 1976. We all know it's 2025 today. Without further ado, let's bring on our guest and talk about it.
Philip Johnston, co-founder of Starcloud. Welcome to Thinking on Paper.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me, Jeremy and Mark.
Pleasure.
I like the reference to O'Neill. Do you guys know what an O'Neill ring is? It's the best example of, or what the best design for a orbital colony. Anybody that's interested should Wikipedia the O'Neill ring concept.
Why is it so perfect?
So it basically it spins so you have artificial gravity, but it's designed in a way that would reflect sunlight. Yes, it looks a bit like what I'm thinking.
There's a bunch of different drawings in here. Yeah.
Yeah. It's basically a long tube which has the sides opened out to reflect sunlight and generate power. So the whole thing is either permanently in sunlight or permanently in dark, but you have artificial gravity, and it's better than just having a ring spinning, basically.
So this is a timely topic. AI is getting thrown at us left, right, top and bottom. And I think some of us who are not, in the data center are even starting to figure out, well, something's got to power all of this AI. Data center demand is up. We know we're limited on power in the U.S., in the world. There's a finite amount of that. So you come up with this idea along with your team to actually put data centers in space. So let's simplify it. In your definition, what is a data center?
A data center, actually, in really the simplest terms, we can be thought of as a low-cost energy provider. So you can run data centers on us, but you can run other things too. But in the simplest terms, a data center is a bunch of chips processing or storing data. I don't know if you have a better definition than that, but
works for me.
Keep it simple. So I spent about 10 years as a data center consultant helping people design and put their IT equipment into these big facilities, whether they were leased or we build them. So it's more on the mechanical electrical side that supports it. So having this capability in space, let's talk through it. Okay, so let's say I'm a company and I've got an IT compute load that powers my business, and I'm trying to figure out where to put it and why and cost benefits. When you have a conversation or when you envision, I know you're still building this and you have the pilot is happening in 2025, but how do you envision talking with somebody to figure out, hey, Jeremy, what's your IT load? And then what's your redundancy requirements? And then how do we configure that, put it on a rocket and let it spin around in lower Earth orbit? How does that process look to you?
Yeah. So I'll try and distinguish between this quite near term and the medium to longer term. So the first few iterations of the satellite, you mentioned the first one's going up in a few months in summer this year. These are designed to offer edge compute workloads for mainly other satellites and also to some degree terrestrial customers who care about data sovereignty and would like to run a workload in space. So for those guys, it's the design of that satellite is quite similar to the design of most satellites in that critical systems have to be redundancy on critical systems and then over provisioning on systems which will degrade over time, particularly solar panels and chips. So yeah, for those conversations, it's basically if we can provide you this amount of compute on orbit, how valuable is that to you, and can we provide that at a price point that makes sense? In the longer term, the ambition is that you can think of us a bit like a CoreWeave or Lambda, Crusoe, Armada, these guys. Essentially, we will be renting out GPU time, and that whoever the buyer of that GPU time is shouldn't really care whether it's in space or on Earth. We'll be able to say that we can provide you H100 time for $150 an hour or $2 an hour, whatever it's going to be. And we do the connectivity, we do the calling, we do the power, and they don't have to think about that really.
One of the things I kind of think about too is we'll talk about how things get up there and where they land and what Lego blocks they end up plugging into. The one thing I tend to think about is we know we have latency between here and Chicago, between here and London, between Atlanta and London. How does the latency thing work, and how does the things you process in that module come back to Earth, and how is that being optimized to make sure it doesn't take too long?
Yeah, so this was basically not solved problem until about 2 years ago when the mega constellations started allowing access directly from other satellite customers. So we're going to plug into one of the mega constellations, be that Starlink, Kuiper, Kepler, one of the others, directly with an optical terminal, so with a space laser. Which, I mean, the data rates on these lasers is extremely high, potentially hundreds of gigabits per second per laser, and you can have multiple lasers if you want. Which is about what a current terrestrial data center. There are definitely terrestrial data centers that have an in and out pipe of about 100 gigabits a second. So it's not too different. In terms of the latency, flying in low Earth orbit is no different really from having a data center terrestrially. If you're 400 kilometers up, that's not that different from having a data center in Alaska or in Seattle or wherever. So yeah, I mean, anything that requires sub 20 millisecond latency will need to remain on Earth. But my view is that all other data centers will inevitably move to space once the launch cost hits a certain point.
What might need sub 20 to remain on Earth? What kind of use case is that?
Very few use cases, to be honest. So nothing that is like an internet-based use case needs that. This call we're having now could easily be 100 millisecond latency. And even things which are very latency sensitive, like for example, if you want to arbitrage two exchanges between London and New York, it's very latency sensitive, but it's actually quicker to do it through space than it is to do it through fiber. It will be very soon if it isn't already much quicker to do it through space. I mean, for one thing, the speed of light is about 50% faster in a vacuum than it is through fiber. So really we're talking about, I mean, very few situations come to mind that require sub 20 milliseconds.
I'll give you a nerdy one just because it's a project that I worked on with some buddies. It's real-time music performance. So if all of us are playing musical instruments from different spots, it requires about 10 milliseconds of latency just to keep us all in time and rhythm.
Oh, nice.
Is that why those Zoom experiments during COVID were so bad?
Yeah, well, they weren't using the stuff that we were using, but I digress. Let's stay focused on data centers. All right, so Philip, we get this box, right, that we put on, and I'm totally simplifying because the technology that you're building is actually quite brilliant. You put it on the back of a rocket. We send it up to space. There's some kind of station up there, right? That it will connect into. Talk me through the Lego blocks and if we can keep it kind of high level.
Yeah. So the modular design that we have in the white paper and that's in the concept video, I would say that's about a 10-year time frame. And the reason you might want to modularize is if you want to, the largest compute cluster you can launch individually is about a 40 megawatt data center. So that's about 100 tons worth of compute, solar panels and radiators. It's what you can fit on one full Starship payload bay, for example. So if you want to build a data center that's internally networked, that's larger than that, and so, for example, for training, you need it to be extremely highly internally networked. You can't have just an optical terminal between them. Then you would need to have them all hooked up to on the same spine, basically somewhere in space. That's what that concept is. I think probably in the more immediate term, we're going to just be launching these individual 40 megawatt blocks, and they'll have their own solar panels and radiators attached. So you're talking about 10 football fields of solar panels and radiators for one of those 40 megawatt blocks, versus like a 4 kilometer by 4 kilometer for the 5 gigawatt block. So yeah, I would say that's probably the thing to focus on in the slightly more immediate term, is these units of 40 megawatts. And you can use that for all kinds of inference workloads and everything else. It's only really training very large models that you need to cluster these things together.
So 40 megawatts, friends and neighbors, is quite a bit of compute load. Just to let everybody know that 40 megawatt data centers terrestrially are massive, like massive acres upon acres upon acres. When you consider 40 megawatts, is that pure IT load, or does that include the backup power stuff as well?
That includes backup power. I mean, well, actually, we one of the nice things about being in a dawn-dusk sun-synchronous orbit is that we're always in the sun, and so we'll need less backup power than, we'll still have some redundancy, but we'll need less than a terrestrial data center would.
Is this the Terminator line?
Yes, the Terminator line.
Yes,
exactly.
I got it there, yeah.
Been waiting to say that.
I've been waiting to say that. And so because the sun-synchronous orbit, I've heard of lower Earth orbit, but I've never heard of sun-synchronous orbit. And is that to keep it on the Terminator line? So it's always on that line between darkness and daylight. So the solar energy is always there.
Yes, exactly. It's not super easy to explain without oranges and apples next to me. But as the Earth processes around, if you're in an orbit that maintains the same, they call it LTAM, like the same position relative to the sun, as the Earth moves around the sun, unless you have this sun-synchronous property, which you get by having, because it's basically the oblateness of the Earth, like it's slightly fatter on the northern hemisphere than it is on the bottom hemisphere, means if you're at a certain angle, about 7 degrees off, then as the Earth moves around the sun, your whole orbit moves by 1/365th of an orbit every day. And so that means that you stay on the Terminator as the Earth rotates around the sun. That's what that means.
Can I just do a shout out for a book? I know about the Terminator line not because I'm a T1000, because I read Orbital by Samantha Harvey recently. And for anyone who's listening who wants to try to imagine what it's like in orbit, check this book out because it's beautiful.
I've not. I might have to buy that myself.
It's a very short one about being on the space station for 6 months.
Awesome. Sounds amazing.
I just bought it too, Philip. I haven't gotten into it yet. So check this out. I know you're probably kind of thinking, all right, putting stuff in space, that seems pretty cool, pretty interesting, but doesn't it cost a pile of money to send stuff up there, right? And where we're at, like, launch cost right now is what, about $8 million ish to kind of put some stuff in space, just for round numbers?
If you want to book your own launch, it's about $8 million. The beautiful thing very recently and in the last sort of 3-4 years is these rideshare missions. Our first satellite is a 50 kilo small satellite, about the size of a fridge. That cost us $300,000.
Nice.
It's amazing. It's honestly amazing.
Because you're hitching a ride. Yeah.
Yeah, because we're hitching a ride. Those Falcon 9 rideshare missions will launch about 20 missions at once, each of which is paying about $6,000 a kilo. And you can put pretty small stuff on there. If you want to go down even smaller than us, you can pay like $50,000 and put a CubeSat on there if you want.
I love that. And on the other side of that, we talk about the cost to get up in space, but based on your white paper and some stuff that we've looked at, I mean, significant cost reduction as far as electricity expenses from the hundreds of millions to the tens of millions. When you start talking in orders of magnitude like that, things start to seem really, really, really compelling.
Yeah, I would say it is all highly contingent on the launch cost continuing to fall. So it used to be with the shuttle about, 15, 20 years ago, it was about $60,000 a kilo. Now it's come down to $6,000 a kilo. That's what we're paying for the first launch. We need the launch cost definitely under $500 a kilo. The marginal launch cost with Starship is projected to be $10 a kilo. So that gives you some sense of where we're heading. Yeah, anything under about $500 a kilo, and we're good to go. But if it gets down to $10 a kilo, or even if it's $50 a kilo, which is what they say they're going to charge customers, we will be an absurdly profitable company.
Sounds good. Mark, I'm going to try and get this in before you ring the bell on me. But going back to O'Neill's book in High Frontier, he talks about actually setting up manufacturing in space and using these, what do you call them, mass loaders, like this magnetic rail system from the moon that fires things out. Like, is that something that is being entertained as we look down the road as an alternative to trying to get exit velocity from Earth?
Yes. I mean, actually, people are doing these rail guns on Earth. There's a company called it's not Slingshot. There's a company called something which is doing this rail gun from Earth. Certainly from the moon, it's like that is almost certainly the way you would do it from the moon in the end state. You can also actually quite feasibly have space elevators hanging off the moon. So yeah, that's one way to do it. And you can have a space elevator on a track that rotates around so that it's, I don't know. Anyway.
That's a callback to Quantum Supremacy Book Club, where we talk about space elevators and material science and the possibilities of what quantum can do. Sounds like a Total Recall, a mixture of all of our science fiction becoming reality, becoming science fiction, becoming reality.
I mean, I'm of the view you could build a space elevator on Earth for about $10 billion. The problem with space elevators terrestrially is they're just going to get pummeled with stuff in LEO. So even if you have these like avoidance maneuvers, stuff is going to be colliding with them at about 27,000 kilometers an hour all the time. So yeah, it just doesn't really work as well.
A little more disruptive than gnats on a windshield on the highway, right? Like we're talking, And LEO, lower Earth orbit, yeah.
If they're strong enough to be there, are they not strong enough to withstand almost all impact?
No, I mean, they're strong enough basically they have to have an anchor out beyond geo. So they have to be about 30,000 kilometers long. So they're strong enough, tension-wise like this. But if you shoot a gun at it, it's like shooting a gun at a taut rope. Like it can hold this way, but if you shoot a bullet at it, it's just going to rip the whole thing apart.
Good analogy.
But just back to your point on the moon and manufacturing in space, yeah, I'm very convinced manufacturing in space is going to be a thing as well. The whole thing is contingent on low-cost launch. Once you have low-cost launch, it makes no sense to do lots of things on Earth, manufacturing, data processing, lots of things. The moon is interesting because the lunar regolith is mainly silicon, which is useful for manufacturing solar panels. And it would take about 20 times less energy to get silicon cells from the lunar surface to LEO than it does to get silicon cells from Earth to LEO. So it does make a lot more sense to manufacture them on the lunar surface and then transport them to LEO if you want to have low latency. If you want to build big solar farms in LEO, then you probably want to manufacture them on the moon.
It's got to be pretty fun to think this big, Philip, and also like start to execute on this.
It's very fun. I do like it.
It's incredible. Like, how many people are thinking as big as you? You mentioned manufacturing on the moon. Some people might think that these are flights of fancy, but they're not. They're happening. You said these things are happening. Is it a very small group of you doing this, or is there much more happening than we believe, than we know?
It's growing as Starship looks like it's going to work more and more, basically. So, yeah, there's a whole bunch of people looking at lunar mining of various lunar resources. I guess you guys have seen the Interloon guys, Rob Meyerson. They're trying to mine helium-3 on the moon. It's still relatively small now. It's going to be like the capacity for Earth to put stuff in orbit is going to go up by about 100,000x in the next 5 to 10 years. So we're talking about the very early days of an industry. It's a bit like, it's like the first people to arrive in California back in the 1850s or whatever. That's how it feels to me anyway.
Well, keep us in mind as you run across these folks, because space technology is one of our threads that we explore, along with quantum, along with AI, along with blockchain. A lot of different areas.
Can I just add just a question on that analogy to the gold rush? Then, are you selling the shovels or are you digging for the gold? Like it is, because you mentioned that
Good question.
Starcloud isn't just data centers, but we kind of prepped for this, that it was just data centers. But so maybe
Well, it is. I mean, it is. We've got enough to bite off with data centers to become. Then data centers is definitely the first thing you would do, and it's also the biggest market. Like data centers in the end state is, I mean, in my view, data centers in the end state is like 99% of the economy. So, like the end state of any intelligent star system is to build a Dyson sphere hooked up to as much compute as you can physically support, which is or like a matryoshka brain is what they call it. That takes a few million years, but that's what Starcloud is the first company ever that is on a path to building a Dyson sphere / matryoshka brain.
So for those of you guys just listening and you're not seeing us, half of my face just melted in a couple of those thoughts and words. But no, it's awesome. All right, Philip, one quick question.
But there was a point there I wanted to touch on. What was the start of your?
Got the analogy to the gold rush. Are you selling the shovels or are
Sorry.
you digging for gold?
I like to think we're digging for gold. I know it's very popular in Silicon Valley to be super keen on selling shovels. There are times when you just want to dig for gold. I like to think we're digging for gold.
Go big or go home. So, all right, here's one question. Then I want to actually unpack this pilot that you're getting ready to put up in the next few months. But I remember about 10 years ago when I was like knee deep in data center world, solar flares was like this big thing, and it was like, oh, we got to prepare for solar flare because when they happen, it's going to wreak havoc on all of our systems and all of this. And there were some effects for some big ones, but that being a little bit more applicable when you have these assets in space. Have you guys thought about the solar flare thing, and what does that mean for you?
Yeah. So there was a huge solar flare in mid last year. I don't know if you guys saw the Northern Lights around April last year. Even in Seattle, it was crazy. I think it was the biggest one in maybe 20 years at least. Not a single Starlink satellite went down, and they had 5,000 in orbit. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not as big of a problem as people, I think. If there's like a Carrington event, in the 1850s that had this big blackout, if there's that scale, then yes, we're a bit fucked, but so is everybody else.
Everything on Earth is too, right? Yeah, it carries the data centers on Earth are going to have trouble with a Carrington event too, right?
Yeah.
So solar flares aren't, unless there is another Carrington event, a major concern. Space junk, maintenance, cooling, this kind of matrix of challenges.
Cooling is by far the biggest challenge we're solving. I mean, people think space is cold and so cooling is easy. Because there's no atmosphere, you don't have convection or conduction, so everything needs to be dissipated with infrared, like black body radiation. So that means having very large, low-cost, low-mass deployable radiators. So basically, 2 sheets of metal that you're pumping coolant through. It doesn't need to be expensive, but right now they are very expensive. So that's our biggest engineering challenge, is making these large, low-cost, low-mass deployable radiators. I would say that's actually like core technology for energy, for any high energy use case in space, also for space manufacturing and everything else. The others are solvable. Space debris is not as big of a problem as people think. So the way, either you fly very low or you fly very high. So we're flying in VLEO for the first 2 satellites, it's 350 kilometers. It's like a self-cleaning orbit because everything naturally deorbits within a month because of the low levels of drag in the upper atmosphere. Or when the satellite's larger, you can fly higher. So we have the problem with flying low is you need thrusters to maintain your orbit, and the problem with flying high is you're in the Van Allen radiation belt. But luckily, as the satellite gets larger, shielding is naturally taken up. The structure itself is naturally more shielding.
So let's unpack that a little bit. As you get higher, you have to deal with more radiation. And as you get lower, you require thrust and propulsion to get you to maintain the spot that you're in. What happens if you don't have that? Does it just kind of fall?
Yeah.
Fall back to Earth?
Yeah, if you were at 350 kilometers, it'll take you about a month before you burn up in the upper atmosphere.
So how do you have enough fuel to maintain that? Like, how does that work?
You use ion thrusters. So we have these 2 gridded iodine thrusters. It's basically like a mini particle accelerator that shoots stuff out the back at 20 kilometers a second. And that means that you need very little fuel. So it keeps us up there for about 5 years.
Philip, I love that you referred to a mini particle accelerator like a little Pez dispenser in your pocket. It's just a little mini particle accelerator. It's all good.
It's the size of a Rubik's Cube and it shoots stuff out of the bag at 20 kilometers a second.
Man, this could be the coolest episode I think I've ever been a part of.
It definitely
Like, you might even call it. It shoots krypton out of the back at 20 kilometers a second.
Stop it.
Krypton or Xenon, one of the two.
Krypton's real, although it's kryptonite. Last week, the handover question was from him, but we had Ubotica on and their AI-powered satellites, and we were speaking about these low Earth orbit where they run out of energy and essentially drop from the sky and burn up. And he was speaking about recycling these satellites somehow. Is that something that you're looking at, interested and aware of, or do you think that at the moment that's a secondary thing to solve further down the line?
The problem is the chips need to be replaced every 4 years anyway. So we might look to reuse some of the structure, and in the white paper and in the video, that's what you see is this spine that stays up for longer, which has the solar panels and radiators. But the actual compute module, it's unlikely we would bring it back to do anything with, because after 5 years, those chips are not going to generate cash for us anyway. So no, we haven't really baked in reusability for now. Re-entering satellites is expensive and time-consuming and annoying. So I'm not sure exactly how they meant to do it. If they meant to re-enter, then that's very, very, very annoying to do.
A little harder coming down than going up, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What let's unpack this is it a pilot, is it a test, what are you calling this?
Demonstrator mission, yeah. So that's going to have about 100 times more powerful GPU compute than has ever been operated in space before. And the purpose of that is just to prove that our radiation shielding thermal management solutions allow us to operate terrestrial GPUs in space.
So, all right. So talk to me about this mission, right? So what would success look like based on like after you're done with it, what boxes do you want to have checked to move on to the next experiment?
We want to have run at least 100 times more powerful GPU compute in space. That will be some demonstrator workloads. We want to do some kind of like gimmicky things like training the first model in space. We're really talking about data center grade terrestrial hardware, like the top of the line. I won't say the name because we're keeping it under wraps, but you can almost certainly guess the chip we're flying. So yeah, we want to do some things like training and modeling in space. The icing on the cake would be if we could run a customer workload. So we're speaking with a few satellites now where they will send us raw imagery. We will then reference workload on that and we will downlink in real time the insight from that. So it might be, for example, they send us all this imagery of California and we identify if there's a wildfire somewhere and we just downlink that location data, which is, less than a kilobyte. So they send us five gigabytes of data. We send down 1 kilobyte, which is the insight they actually care about. That would be the pricing of it.
You and Fenton should go bowling one day. Yeah.
We were speaking about this last week as well with Fenton.
Yeah. I mean, edge compute is the popular one because it's the main use case initially. Yeah.
The most important question I have for you for the day: has Red Bull approached you for the rights to operating and maintaining these satellites in space?
Red Bull.
I'm just thinking of the guy in the spacesuit, right? Yeah.
Baumgart.
If they want to pay us to put a Red Bull sticker on the satellite, we have a camera on the outside. We can get a nice shot of the Earth in the background.
I love it. I think it's a great time, Mr. Fielding, to transition to hot buttons. Philip, are you feeling ready? You want to stretch it out a little bit, see if we can get through these hot buttons?
Could we paint a thinking on paper sticker on the satellite?
Oh, I'd love that.
So there's a price for everything.
Hot buttons, 30 seconds, 5 yes or no or one word answers. It's the Daniel Kahneman thinking fast, thinking slow. You're thinking fast. You've got the clock, Jeremy. Can I see a clock?
Clock is coming. Off you go.
Question number 1. The most underrated technology breakthrough of the past decade.
Humanoids.
AGI, when?
12 months.
What's the best science fiction movie?
I don't have a good one. I don't have a good answer for that.
Name one science fiction movie.
I actually can't even think of a science fiction.
So much pressure.
Star Wars.
Terminator. Just the other one was the other two. What's the most used app on your phone right now?
What's that?
And what's your favorite country that you have lived in?
Singapore. Or US.
Hot buns.
Hot buttons. There you have it.
It's too slow on the hot buttons.
Oh, it's all good. We actually told you they would be this or that questions, but you had to come up with the answer yourself. So I'll give you some extra credit.
I started with the wrong one. And what's the most underrated technology of the past decade? That's a thinker.
Yeah, so maybe you might think humanoids are actually overrated right now. I think they're like mega underrated.
Any particular reasoning behind?
I'm a believer that there'll be like 100 billion humanoid robots within 15 years, 10, 15 years.
Have you talked to the folks at Figure yet?
No, but I've just backed this incredible YC company called Proception with Jay Lee. People should Google him. There's a team that just left Optimus. They were doing the dexterity in the hand. I put a very small angel check in those guys. They're going through Y Combinator now. They'll do a race in a month, in a week.
Sounds like someone we should talk to, Mark.
Guys! Oh my God, you should get this guy on, Jay Lee. He's freaking amazing. Yeah,
do it.
Anybody who's the ideas. 100? Did you say 100 billion humanoids within 15 years? I just love that. That idea is just. A lot of people would think it was bonkers. I think it's amazing, and
maybe 15 years might be ambitious just on the manufacturing side, but like that's where we're headed. Like 100 billion humanoids. Yeah, okay, mate, give it 20 years.
Hey, food delivery robots, self-driving cars. I mean, it's all adjacent, right? We just got to figure out how to do this thing, right?
Well, that's literally the Optimus team that was doing that has left to do their own startup. It's called Proception. That's Jay Lee. It's unbelievably good.
All right, Jay Lee, let's put him on the list. Mark, do you have
top of the list?
Yeah, exactly. Mark, do you have any more questions? I've been throwing a lot at Philip from a data center, from kind of what he's doing technology wise. Any thoughts before we move into the news?
Well, I like the Mark Zuckerberg quote in the white paper. We would build out bigger clusters than we currently can if we could get the energy to do it. And in my non-data center brain, listening to you two talk about it feels that we're wasting our time on Earth. We should just get up there and do it. But obviously,
I think it's contingent on launch cost. I do need to emphasize that. Like we need to be building enormous numbers of starships, which they are building factories to do. That's why I'm bullish on it. But for the next 5 years, we're certainly going to need to continue building data centers on Earth, like 5-10 years at least.
I do have one question, and it's a lot of people who are listening to this. Maybe they're like us; they've all been reading Nexus, and they've all been reading too much tech pessimism. And the moment that people start talking about a grandiose ambition like this, people get scared, people get nervous. You don't need to go into space. You don't need to be doing this. We've got too many problems on Earth. What do you say to that argument that this is maybe frivolous or not necessary, or what's the benefit to humanity?
I mean, I can see the argument for things like building cities on Mars, although personally I'm hugely in favor of building cities on Mars. But what we're doing is actually solving the Earth problem. Like we're providing energy for at least cheaper than a tenth the cost. And you don't have to consume enormous amounts of fresh water to keep the data centers cool. And you don't have to burn fossil fuels. And it's just in all dimensions, it makes life on Earth better. So what we're doing in particular doesn't fall under that bucket. Certainly, I can see why people might think that about building a city on Mars, though, yeah, as I say, I'm very much not in that.
Awesome. We're on to the news. All right, Mark, I'm going to buck the system and ask the question that you didn't want me to ask because I'm too compelled to. It's been on my brain. So this week, Oxford University, I'm ignoring your bell, Oxford University, Department of Physics, demonstrated distributed quantum computing together, meaning they've successfully linked two quantum processors together to work together, right? Are you at all thinking about like what quantum computing could look like in your footprint?
I've been approached by a few quantum people who say that space is a good place to do quantum stuff because it's a vacuum and because it's very cold, but it's not something we've put too much time into thinking about, to be honest. Maybe we will, but...
Plenty on your plate, Philip. Plenty on your plate.
Yes, indeed.
Good stuff. Well, stay tuned for more quantum stuff. We got another quantum show coming up very soon. Carryover question. Mark, let's fire away.
So the carryover question was from Finton, who will organise a drink with you and him, his question was, what technology do you think will be the next to have as big an impact on society and civilization as the mobile phone has?
Easily got to be AI, I presume. Yeah, if AI counts as a technology in the same way that mobile phones do. If not, then humanoids. Let's call it humanoids. I think humanoids are like a platform in the same way that an iPhone is like a platform. I think you'll be able to download apps for your humanoid for niche applications. Like, for example, if you want your humanoid to do tango lessons with the elderly, like that's probably not a use case that Tesla's going to build for, but somebody will build it, and you'll be able to download that. And instead of paying $30 an hour per person, you can pay $2 an hour for your humanoid to teach the elderly tango lessons.
I'm going to raise my silly question for my audience because I know that you're out there. What's the difference between a humanoid and a robot? Why do you refer to them as humanoids, not robots?
Well, a humanoid is a robot in humanoid form. So it's, for a long time, I think people have presumed that robots will be just optimized for their specific tasks. But it seems to be getting clearer and clearer that actually general purpose robots that fit into the way that the world is built are going to be much more useful. And that is a robot in human form. So I'm very bullish on there being lots of those.
Well, here's another tie-in, Mark, to Michio Kaku and quantum supremacy. So if these humanoids get developed, we can just dump them on the surface of the moon, on the surface of Mars, and we can actually could beam our consciousness there, according to Michio Kaku. Yeah. Theoretically, we don't even need spaceships anymore. We can just...
Well, yeah, I mean, we might... I think it's presumptive to say that our consciousness will be the most advanced in 20 years' time. It could be that humanoids are much more conscious than us in 20 years' time, however you define consciousness. In which case, yeah, you just send them out to the far-flung reaches of the
your network of brain stops. I love it.
How are we uploading our consciousness? Is this faster than speed of light transfer of our consciousness? If the humanoids are out in the far reaches of interstellar space, are we using wormholes?
Not the speed of light. No.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So how are we beaming our consciousness into the far reaches of the universe?
No, into far reaches of the galaxy. It would only take about it takes a few million years to colonize the galaxy. Even if you're going at the speed of a push bike, it takes about 10,000 years to get to the nearest star. So it really would not take that long to colonize the galaxy in terms of galactic timeframes, which is honestly a scary thought. That's what the Fermi paradox is. It's where is everybody? If there was intelligent life at any other star, it would only take them a couple of million years to colonize galaxies. So we should see them everywhere, but we don't.
But technically, Philip, if my consciousness was in superposition with my humanoid robot somewhere,
that's what I meant.
It could be instantaneous, right?
Sorry, Mark, I apologize. That was very rude of me. I apologize. Quantum super.
Oh man, too much fun. Too much fun.
Is it too late to ask Philip where is everybody?
Where is everybody? I mean, I think it seems like there isn't anybody. I don't know. I watched this incredible YouTube video yesterday explaining the probabilities of extraterrestrial life, and the conclusion was basically we are as rare as we seem.
No.
And that's
no pregnant pause. We have a lag. He'll come back.
He was about to drop the secrets of the universe. I hope that the NSA haven't suddenly got involved.
Oh my goodness, we might be in trouble.
Okay, we'll have to finish that question for ourselves, Jeremy, in the after show VIP backstage area.
That sounds like a plan. Philip, we'll hang out for another second, see if we can get you refreshing. If not, it was a blast having a conversation with you today, and we will continue the dialogue for sure. Thanks for joining us. Friends and neighbors, we're backstage. We went all over the place today. We talked about a little bit of quantum. We talked about putting data centers in space and lower Earth orbit. We dispelled some myths. Mark, I'm kind of a nerd on everything we talked about today. What landed for you and why?
The sheer brazen ambition, the sheer will, the sheer determination to do bonkers, crazy, what might appear to many science fiction, and making it real. His timelines were short. The ideas were incredible. And in researching the show, we need to have more efficient, quicker data centers. We need more GPUs. There needs to be a solution. And listening to Philip speak, the solution is space.
You can't help but get excited about, like you said, the ambition of what he's trying to accomplish and what he's actually taken tangible steps to accomplish. And I think I would love to have him back on the show after this test coming up in a few months, where they're actually going to put the largest amount of GPUs at work in space. And they've got some fun ways that they're going to do that. So we'll definitely stay in touch. there. But exciting stuff.
Well, yeah, I've got I know you have to jump, but global data center capacity is growing at 19 to 22% annually, driven by AI. By 2027, NVIDIA's AI servers could consume up to 134 terawatts per hour per year, over 3 times the electricity used by London. We need to be pretty quick. Don't we, really? Because if we're going to we've almost signed our own future away, haven't we, to AI? So we need to have these data centers. And Philip's back.
Hello.
Well, outstanding. We were just doing our backstage breakdown, but Philip, you left us with a pregnant pause. Let's have you finish that thought that you had.
I cannot remember what it was now, but
we'll have to remind you after the show, because we thought the NSA might have taken you out because you were about to unleash the secrets of the universe.
Well, Philip,
I really enjoy to talk to people who are keen, excited about talking about larger. Lots of people just look at me like I'm insane.
This is what we do this every week, Philip. If you want to come again, if you want to invite your friends, like, we'll listen to you and have your grandiose ideas. We love it.
Amazing. I'll get some people to come.
Let's catch up after this first demonstration and see how it went and check in, and would love to talk to some of the folks that you had mentioned on the show. But thanks for joining. We'll post a bunch of notes and links and make sure everyone can follow the journey, man. Keep up the great work.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. And
should I drop that?
See you next week, Jeremy. Be curious. Stay disruptive.
Keep thinking on paper.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
See you in space.
All right. Good day. Hey, www.thinkingonpaper.xyz. Come check out what we're doing. Tell us how we're doing. Is this stuff resonating? Are you guys enjoying hearing about space data centers and quantum computing and learning why the hell all of this stuff matters? I do. I know Mark does. We hope you do. Tell us how we're doing.
But that's the sign of a successful podcast, Jeremy, is if the host would do it. If nobody's listening, then it means that it's good, at least working for them. We've got Ion Q coming on. We have David Bianchi, Hollywood actor, working in Film 3. We have World ID coming on, which is very exciting.
Huge.
Orb. We have Kevin Kelly. Go to thinkingonpaper.xyz to learn all of those things. Win a signed copy of his book. Join our book club. We're going to be announcing a new book very soon. We've got 2 more chapters of Nexus, the most depressing book you'll ever read on artificial intelligence. We've nearly finished it, and maybe he's going to end with a big twist. And you know what? Ooh, flowers and roses and AI is our friend.
Butterflies.
We'll see.
Till next time.
Bye-bye.